Plummeting temperatures bringing threats of an overnight freeze. Our team is monitoring live road conditions, and meteorologist Jasmine Lomax breaking down our next chance for more snow. Maryland's Department of Juvenile Services continues to come under fire amid the rise in youth violence. We're pressing lawmakers on what changes we could see to improve public safety.
Okay, but which bill is it? Which bill are you talking about?
Plus, the head of the troubled department facing sharp criticism from outside Maryland.
Nobody thought he did a good job.
Why a New York City councilman says his previous role overseeing inmates was a, quote, total disaster. A convicted sex offender is released early only to allegedly commit a brutal murder.
And no other father has to go through the loss that we've experienced.
The bill the victim's father is pushing for to keep these criminals locked up. Then why a tax expert warns against the governor's plan to spend some of Maryland's rainy day fund.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 10.
Residents across Baltimore are digging out from our first considerable snowstorm in more than 2 years. Fox 45 is on weather alert as the threat of refreeze on area roads could complicate your morning commute.
Our Chevy Storm Tracker is keeping an eye on the conditions as the temperature will continue to drop overnight. High wind will also be a factor as the Bay Bridge, Key Bridge, and Tiding Bridge all under wind warnings tonight. Well, earlier today, multiple cars and trucks were involved in a crash on the Key Bridge, leading to a fuel spill and a partial shutdown of that bridge. Emergency officials are reminding people to use an abundance of caution while driving tonight and into tomorrow. Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Mary Bubala.
And I'm Kai Jackson. In fact, several local school systems are already closing or delayed tomorrow in anticipation of slick conditions. Howard County schools are closed, and Anne Arundel County school students will have a virtual learning tomorrow.
Cecil, Harford, Baltimore, and Carroll counties all operating on a 2-hour delay tomorrow, along with Baltimore City. Fox 45 News will continue to update this list throughout the night. You can also follow along and get updates at foxbaltimore.com. And we may not be out of the woods yet.
Unfortunately, meteorologist Jasmine Lomax has an update right now on the current conditions and a possible second storm heading this way. Jasmine.
Thanks, Kai and Mary. We are in for a very cold night, but even after tonight, the winter weather is going to last through the end of the week as we get ready for another round of snow. First tonight, we are looking at temperatures quickly plummeting to the teens. Right now, we're seeing those numbers in the teens and in the 20s. Wind chills across many parts of the state already in the single digits. It is very cold, and with the cold temperatures, there's the potential for a refreeze tonight, especially where there's standing water, untreated roads. Even some slushy areas could refreeze overnight. If you will be driving in the morning, you certainly want to make sure that you are driving safely and giving yourselves enough time on the roads. Now we get ready for another round of snow on Friday that could also cause impacts to the commute. But after that, warmer temperatures next week, putting us above average for this time of year. Coming up, we'll have a closer look at how cold it gets tonight and when we see that snow in my Weather Authority forecast. Back to you.
Jasmine, thank you. Well, no school today for thousands of area students, meaning plenty of time to enjoy the snow. Holly shared this photo of her family out having some fun, and they weren't the only ones taking advantage.
As a teacher, I love the snow, so just letting all kids know that teachers love the snow and snow days.
I like playing in the snow. I get to go really fast.
Can't always, enjoy the first time he's in the snow.
Well, Robin shared this picture of her grandson, Brock, all smiles while enjoying the snowfall at Wilson Point, that's in Baltimore County. Be sure to send us your favorite photos and videos via Chime In. You can scan the QR code on your screen. You can also submit them through the Chime In tab on our website, WBFF.
And wake up tomorrow morning with our Fox 45 weather team as they continue to track the freezing temperatures and the potential for more snow. Meteorologist Amy Aronson has her full forecast starting at 4:30 a.m.
Crime reform is taking center stage in Annapolis during this year's legislative session as lawmakers focus on several crime and justice policies many say need to be revisited.
Governor Moore says he is backing a bill that would limit early release for some sexual assault offenders.
Well, the bill is named after Pavel Lepere, the Baltimore Tech CEO, allegedly murdered by convicted sex offender Jason Billingsley.
Billingsley was released from prison last year for good behavior, but lawmakers and Pavel Lepere's family are pushing for tougher restrictions.
All of our extended families are victims. The employees of EcoMap Technologies, Pava's friends and coworkers, and other members of the Baltimore tech community ecosystem are victims. The entire city of Baltimore was held hostage, and as a result is also a victim.
One example, one time is one time too many. We want to make sure that we put laws in place that will keep all the citizens protected.
Fox 45's Keith Daniels will lay out the details of this proposed legislation coming up at 10:15.
But our team coverage begins with the demands for change within Maryland's juvenile justice system. Jeff Abel is examining transparency questions surrounding the Department of Juvenile Services.
First, Mackenzie Frost is pushing state lawmakers about their plans to address youth crime laws.
Governor Westmore tells me that he wants to see accountability in any piece of legislation that comes to his desk in terms of juvenile crime. But what that actually means in terms of legislation still remains unclear, and some leaders are refusing to talk about specifics.
Welcome to the Banner's first preview of a 90-day session.
Juvenile crime top of mind for most leaders in Annapolis this year.
I want legislation that focuses on accountability.
During a panel discussion Tuesday morning, the leaders of the judicial committees in both chambers talking about holding the Department of Juvenile Services accountable for its responsibilities, especially with more than a $300 million budget.
So what are we spending this $318 million every year?
We have buildings.
That's what we do, but that's what I'm talking about, where we have to re-examine.
Not entirely clear that we're following up with some of those kids who need to be followed up with.
Senate President Bill Ferguson also talking about ensuring programming offered within DJS is effective. But Speaker Adrian Jones made it clear wholesale juvenile justice changes are not likely this year.
Senate, we don't anticipate rolling back any of these juvenile justice laws. We're looking to make some tweaks to them.
Later, we tried to clarify with the Speaker about her comments.
Why not make larger changes?
I had to be, not just in general, because we did some things all along. We had hearings, etc.
Right, but no laws were actually changed during those hearings.
But we have a bill that did not get passed, and that's what.
So what bill should we be looking for this session?
The bill that didn't get passed last time.
Which was what?
It's the juvenile justice bill. You'll see it when it comes out. It's going to be on the document. And I don't want to take from the person, it's a good bill. Okay,
but which bill is it? Which bill are you talking about?
The juvenile justice bill.
But instead, Speaker Jones walking away from us without providing any clarity about what she's looking for.
While there may be differences in little details, overall there's a unified approach or unified vision that we have to get this. This has to change. We have to do better.
Later, we pressed Senate President Ferguson about the Speaker's comments and what's going to unfold.
Do you think the messaging is wrong, though, to hear from the Speaker say that it'll just be tweaks to the current system when we're hearing an outcry from communities that they want a bigger change?
I think we'll see real reform that is important and real.
He says the juvenile justice reform law previously passed was not the end, but like Speaker Jones, rolling it all back isn't likely.
Those reforms were the right direction. How they've been implemented has not met our goal. When it comes to specifically kids with firearms.
Who's responsible for the failure of the implementation?
Look, all of us at some degree. I mean, at some point, it's not okay where we are. And, I think all of us should feel a level of accountability that kids deserve better, communities deserve better.
All right, good afternoon and welcome everyone to the...
Meanwhile, hearings are happening in the Senate where DJS Secretary Vincent Schiraldi continues to back data that he says shows declining juvenile crime.
Juvenile crime rates are still much lower than they were a decade ago and still lower than they were pre-pandemic.
All while prosecutors...
The reality is the numbers do not suggest a reduction in youth crime.
Continue to push back on that notion.
Is youth crime down? Not by any measure of anybody who's paying attention.
Lawmakers say they are committed to finding a solution, but right now conversations continue without a clear path forward. With the focus seemingly starting to take shape around oversight and accountability within the Department of Juvenile Services, we could get more information about how that will actually play out in reality when Governor Westmore unveils his budget proposal Wednesday morning. In the State House, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Now, Governor Moore has defended DJS Secretary Vincent Schiraldi amid backlash about his views on juvenile crime. Schiraldi has said he believes young people should be kept out of the adult prison system until age 25 because scientists have found, some of them, that brains aren't fully developed until then. The governor calls Schiraldi a reformer. But more than a dozen top prosecutors across Maryland say something needs to change within the state's juvenile justice system. Baltimore County State's Attorney Scott Schellenberger says Schiraldi deserves more time to work out these issues, but he wants to reassess it all in a year.
We can't wait forever because this is too big an issue that needs to be fixed to be broken for too long. So, you know, I'm willing to take another look at this. We'll come see you again next year this time.
Deal.
And we can have the same questions. But, you know, the person who came into that position last year, you know, if you didn't help the 13-year-old, well, now they're 14. And you got to help them now when they're 14. And if we're still having this conversation when they're 15, well, then we might need to have some other conversations.
Before coming to Maryland, Secretary Schiraldi was the corrections commissioner in New York City. During his tenure, he pushed for a shutdown of Rikers Island. Fox 45 News spoke with the head of the corrections union in New York, who says Schiraldi pushed Rikers Island to a breaking point to prove it was time to shut down the jail.
He came in here with this mindset of providing everything for the inmate population and not providing things that we needed. You know, wasn't concerned about our well-being at all. We had officers working triple shift. It was like we lived in a third world country. And he contributed to that madness.
Well, now another voice from Secretary's time in New York City. Joining this conversation, Fox 45's Jeff Abel spoke to a city councilman who is sharing his concerns about Schiraldi. Jeff?
Well, Vincent Schiraldi spent 7 months leading New York City's Department of Corrections. But when he left, one city councilman in New York is telling us tonight he left that department in critical condition.
Under Schiraldi, everything he promised to do, he didn't.
New York City Councilman Robert Holden says the Big Apple is still recovering from what he believes was one big mistake.
Vincent Schiraldi was a disaster. I'm telling you, as God is my witness, I could not believe what I saw. He was letting it go, and that was the plan, I guess.
Secretary Schiraldi understands accountability.
Vincent Schiraldi is now Secretary of Maryland's Department of Juvenile Services. But prior to his appointment in Maryland, Schiraldi was director of New York City's Department of Corrections, where he oversaw Rikers Island, the city's pretrial lockup of some 10,000 inmates.
It was so mismanaged.
As a member of the City Council's Criminal Justice Committee, Councilman Holden kept watch over the deplorable conditions which he says developed under Schiraldi's leadership.
There were 2 female correction officers for a unit with, it looked like hundreds of men, and there were just noise and screaming, and they were breaking plexiglass. I felt I was in like some movie where the inmates had taken over the jails. We had hundreds of correction officers not wanting to come to work. They just stopped coming to work because they couldn't take it. It was so bad.
Ultimately, Holden says Schiraldi endorsed a complete shutdown of Rikers Island. In Maryland, he's endorsed abolishing juvenile jails.
Young people are not just smaller versions of adults. They're not yet fully mature. Their brains are still developing.
He has a philosophy that he actually believes in, and he thinks by osmosis he can make it happen. Well, it's not going to happen. You have to actually do the physical work.
The councilman is now questioning Maryland's hiring of Schiraldi. On social media, he recently wrote, "How can anyone even think of letting Schiraldi run their jails after this mess? He couldn't run a hot dog stand."
I can't believe somebody would hire this guy after what we've been through in New York City. It just shows you there was a lack of really vetting this person. Nobody can say that he improved the criminal justice system or the jails in New York City. He made them much worse, period.
The governor's office has yet to comment on the councilman's comments in New York. We're live tonight. Jeff Abel, Fox 45 News.
Jeff, thank you. State Senator Corey McCray says his relationship with the Department of Juvenile Services has changed since Schiraldi took office. Last week, he told Fox 45 News he's drafting legislation calling for more transparency within DJS.
I would like that same type of relationship with Secretary Schiraldi. I know that I've reached out to him on multiple occasions. Unfortunately, there has been a level of unresponsiveness. I am drafting a bill because one of the things that I'm concerned about is when we have juveniles that's engaged in a fatal shooting or a non-fatal shooting, I want to understand what is the after action. How, if they were under the purview of DJS. If they were under the purview of DJS, I think that the Secretary Schiraldi has the responsibility to be able to communicate when did his agency make contact. How do we know that retaliation isn't going to exist? How do we know that someone isn't going to continue to come after this young man or young woman that's under their purview? And he should be able to articulate that in a manner that anybody can understand.
Do you feel like that's happening right now?
Obviously, it hasn't happened, which is why I'm introducing a bill called the DJS Transparency Act of 2024.
When can we see that?
I'm pretty sure you'll see it within the next 7 to 10 days.
And that brings us to our question of the day. Do you think Governor Moore should reconsider replacing DJS Secretary Vincent Schiraldi? So far, 100% of those who voted said yes. You can make your voice heard by going to foxbaltimore.com/vote and clicking on the Midday tab.
Coming up on Fox 45 News at 10, Baltimore police say a traffic stop led to the arrest of teenagers wanted for other violent crimes. Why some say this case highlights the importance of enforcing all laws on the books. Governor Wes Moore dipping into the state's rainy day fund. Why some say it sets a dangerous precedent and the impact it could have on your wallet. City State's Attorney Ivan Bates standing with the grieving family of Baltimore Tech CEO Pavel Lapierre. Her father's emotional plea for change right after the break.
Pavel's unfortunate and tragic loss was avoidable. There is no reason for someone convicted of a first-degree sexual offense that they should be able to get out almost 5 years early. Period. Full stop.
Well, elected officials are pushing for changes to the state's early release system for convicted sex offenders after a convicted sex offender was accused of killing Baltimore Tech CEO Pavel Lapierre. Fox 45's Keith Daniels joins us live with details on this proposal and the powerful and emotional message from her family. Keith?
Well, Mary, the Lapierre family stood with City State's Attorney Ivan Bates and Delegate Elizabeth Embry to unveil the legislation. As you saw, Mayor Brandon Scott was there too. And tonight, a push from a family for change.
Frank Lapierre believes his daughter's murder could have been prevented. Pavel Lapierre's killing, police say, committed by a violent repeat offender.
Let us work together as a community and as a legislature.
The victim's father standing in support of new legislation, the Pava Marie LePere Act.
It means to me that no other family and no other father has to go through the loss that we've experienced that could have been avoided.
The proposed legislation, House Bill 302, would restrict diminution credit or time off their sentences for good conduct for those convicted of first-degree rape and the most violent sex offenses. Delegate Elizabeth Embry introduced the legislation on behalf of City State's Attorney Ivan Bates.
This bill is first and foremost about public safety, which is always will be the priority of my administration. If we cannot keep the public safe from the most egregious violent offenders in our society, then we have failed as public servants.
Delegate Embry with more on the difference this bill would make when considering if an offender should be released from prison early for good time credit.
The Parole Commission, unlike the diminution credit process, the Parole Commission can hear from victims. The Parole Commission can hear from victims' families, from people who cared about the victim of the crime. The Parole Commission can consider the entirety of the person's record and history of violence.
The proposal comes in response to LePere's murder. The 26-year-old tech entrepreneur was killed in September at her Baltimore apartment. Police charged Jason Billingsley, a convicted sex offender, with the crime. He had pleaded guilty in 2015 to sexual assault, sentenced to 30 years, but served only 7 years, released from prison in October 2022 after earning good behavior credits. Now, another victim's father fighting for tougher restrictions.
And while I am heartbroken, I'm also very, very hopeful.
Well, according to Delegate Embry, there are about 10 to 15 people convicted of first-degree sex offenses each year who would be impacted by the Pava Marie LePere Act. We're live tonight. Keith Daniels, Fox 45 News.
Keith, thank you. The state's attorneys across Maryland are calling for several other changes to Maryland's crime laws, including the Child Interrogation Protection Act. Now, the law states police can't question children without parental approval and an attorney present. It's designed to protect children's rights, but police say it inhibits their ability to investigate. Howard County State's Attorney Rich Gibson says both aspects are important.
Our youth deserve extra protections. I'm not against giving them extra protections, but we have to act in ways that promote the public safety consistent with those extra protections.
Currently, law requires attorney permission to question a juvenile, even if a parent approves. Prosecutors argue parents should have more of a say, and the law should require an attorney to be present if a child is questioned by police. Well, Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates and Prince George's County State's Attorney Aisha Braveboy are pushing to increase probation for kids with guns. They also want lawmakers to classify groups who recruit children to steal cars as organized crime units.
A lot of what we're seeing now are more sophisticated operations involving multiple levels of people who are benefiting from this type of crime.
I think one of the things you see criminal organizations able to use juveniles and to say, hey, nothing's going to happen to you in the first place, so we're going to direct you to do that type of behavior.
Bates and Braveboy are also asking DJS to notify the court when a young person violates home monitoring.
Well, the countdown is on ahead of Saturday's playoff showdown against the Texans. An update on the injury report as the team returns to practice inside today.
I'm Scott Thuman on the campaign trail where Iowa has made its decision. Now it's the mad dash to New Hampshire. Who sees opportunity and who may be seeing the end of the road? Coming up.
It is cold outside. Temperatures are in the 20s and 30s, but right now we're seeing wind chills in the single digits and even the teens. We're in for a cold day tomorrow, and then later this week, snow's on the way. I'll break down what you can expect this week in my Weather Authority forecast.
All right, Jasmine, thank you. And as we head to break, this is a live look at a very chilly, cold Inner Harbor.
The wait is finally over. The Ravens are on the practice field with playoff work ahead. Their first practice today as they prepare for the Houston Texans, a team that they faced in Week 1. But both squads are much different come postseason football.
They're just 17 weeks better. You know, I think they do a good job. Obviously, they've steadily improved every single week. I thought they were a very good football team Week 1. I think if you go back and check your records, you'll find that.
As far as today's practice notes, the Ravens were down 3 players, none bigger than starting cornerback Marlon Humphrey. He injured his calf in the Dolphins game, hasn't played since, and did not practice last week. The Ravens did get rookie wide receiver Zay Flowers back on the practice field after missing last week, also with a calf injury. And all 3 of their IR designated to return players were on the practice field today, including tight end Mark Andrews. And the Ravens have 2 roster spots open on their active roster. Reporting in Owings Mills, I'm Morgan Atzit for Sports Unlimited.
And excitement for this weekend's matchup is already building on social media. Let's take a look at some of your responses. I love this one. The bank is going to be crazy. You think? Yeah, it is. Now, this is going to be an extremely fun game to watch. It should be electric. I think it will be indeed. Listen to this one. I think the Ravens will win, but after what the Texans did to the Browns defense, I think this is going to be a good one. How about what the Packers did to Cowboys, right? And here is one of my favorites right here. I'm going to close out right here. We got a Usher meme. You better bring your A game.
And he's singing at the Super Bowl, too. So that's good karma, right? All right. And we want to see your purple pride ahead of the big game this Saturday. Mariah sent this picture of her family showing some love to the Ravens all the way down in Florida. Right. There's no snow down there. Be sure to chime in with your favorite Ravens photos and videos at foxbaltimore.com or on the WBFF app.
Ahead of his budget release tomorrow, Governor Morris says he's dipping into the state's rainy day fund, where the money could be heading, as some raise concerns about taxpayer impact.
And our Chevy Storm Tracker is on I-83 right now. The roads seem to be in pretty good shape, but we remain on weather alert for the possibility of refreeze later tonight. And that's going to mean some issues on those side roads that some are still not fully plowed. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
We're following three big stories at 10:30. Fox 45 is on weather alert as temperatures continue to drop, and we're tracking road conditions and the potential for refreeze tonight.
A routine traffic stop leads to the arrest of 4 teens accused of more serious crimes. Why police experts say low-level crime enforcement is a key aspect of limiting violence in Baltimore.
Governor Moore is dipping into the state's rainy day fund to help offset more than $3 billion in cuts from the Department of Transportation.
This is a one-time usage because we still have to be able to work together.
We have to have a robust conversation about how we fund and what we want to fund in transportation moving forward.
While some say this is the right move, others argue the state has a big spending problem.
Fox 45's Jessica Babb joins us in studio with a closer look at what this proposal could mean for taxpayers. Jessica?
Wes Moore says the $150 million to the Maryland Department of Transportation is a one-time deal. But with a hefty state budget deficit looming, taxpayer advocates warn it could start a precedent of spending instead of saving. On the road to rolling out a new budget proposal, Governor Wes Moore is trying to fill a hole for the Maryland Department of Transportation. Announcing he's going to dip into the state's rainy day fund to help offset $3.3 billion in planned budget cuts.
I pledged to bring fiscal responsibility and common sense.
Despite a warning from former Governor Larry Hogan as he was leaving office.
It would be a mistake for the legislature to use its newly expanded budgetary power to return to the old habits of raiding the rainy day fund or recklessly spending down the surplus.
People want leaders and to look at spending and make sure that the state is living within its means.
Taxpayer advocate David Williams is sounding the alarm.
This could be a really bad precedent. The rainy day fund is there for a reason. It's to assure taxpayers and all citizens of Maryland that there is money there in case things go bad. Well, guess what? Things are going bad right now, and the state needs to hold on to this rainy day fund.
It comes as lawmakers deal with the $761 million structural deficit and more big spending plans on the table, including $3.8 billion committed to the Kirwan Commission and education reform, the estimated $3 billion Red Line project, and $1 billion for clean energy initiatives.
The analysts said Maryland has a spending problem. They spend more than they bring in.
You can't keep on spending money the state doesn't have. And to take money out of the rainy day fund doesn't make any sense and really should be stopped by the legislature.
The last budget shows the state planned to maintain the rainy day fund at the state's target of $2.5 billion. But even as the governor admits, there are long-term concerns about finding revenue streams. Some are worried the fund won't last.
If the governor is able to raid the rainy day fund for his pet transportation projects, what's next? What will individual members of the state legislature do, and what will they ask for, and how will they pay for that, potentially through the rainy day fund?
As for fiscal year 2025, Governor Moore is expected to release his budget tomorrow. Jessica Babb, Fox 45 News.
Jessica, thank you. A closer look at the state's budget reveals Maryland is committing more than $3 billion to pay for the Red Line project, $1 billion annually to fund the state's climate plan, and $3.8 billion for the Kirwan Commission. Analysts predict Maryland will be forced to slow its spending or raise taxes to pay for these promised programs.
I don't see any need for wholesale tax increases in any way. I think there are a couple areas where we may have to look at special funds.
I've heard the Senate president say he doesn't think he has an appetite for big tax increases this year. I've been here long enough to know that sometimes in the middle of the session meal, your appetite changes and all of a sudden things pop up.
And that brings us to our question of the day. Do Annapolis lawmakers have a spending problem? So far, 98% of people who voted say yes. You can weigh in right now at foxbaltimore.com/vote.
Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost will be in Annapolis following every step of this year's legislative session for the next 3 months. You can watch all of her coverage on air and online at foxbaltimore.com. Baltimore police say a 17-year-old was shot around 7 o'clock this evening on Harwell Road near Clifton Park. Police say that teen was shot in the face and taken to the hospital. The shooting took place at the Bel Air Edison Safe Street zone. This is an ongoing investigation. Anyone with information is asked to call Metro Crime Stoppers.
Well, BPD officials say a routine traffic stop led to the discovery of teens who were wanted for other violent crimes. Fox 45's Alexa Ashwell spoke to a law enforcement expert who says this highlights the importance of enforcing all laws on the books.
It was here in Harbor East, one of Baltimore's most affluent communities, where police say an officer conducted a traffic stop after noticing a car's temporary registration was expired. Inside the car, investigators say, were 5 teens, including 3 juveniles, all of them wearing masks, 2 of them armed with BB guns, and 3 of them wanted for armed robberies in Baltimore County.
I think you'll start to see more and more of this as officers in the BPD become more comfortable with the change in leadership in the state's attorney's office.
Law enforcement expert Jason Johnson says this case highlights the importance of enforcing all laws in the books. Johnson pointing out if this had happened a few years ago, the officer may not have taken such action because now former City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby refused to prosecute certain lower-level crimes, including minor traffic offenses.
As law enforcement in Baltimore in particular, note that they have a state's attorney that is interested in holding people accountable, reasonably holding people accountable, that they're more willing to go out there and take, proactive, reasonable steps to enforce the law.
The result in this traffic stop, the arrests of teens with open warrants for violent crimes. According to court documents, the driver of the car, identified as 18-year-old Hilkia Davis, and 2 passengers, including 18-year-old Noah Palmer and his juvenile brother, were all wanted for 2 separate armed robberies investigators say they committed in Towson back on December 17th. Police linking the teens and same vehicle to the crimes through surveillance and footage comparison. Palmer, investigators say, was also wanted in Harford County and was one of 2 teens also charged in the city traffic stop for having possession of a BB gun. Johnson says it's likely the BPD officer prevented the teens from committing even more crimes.
Robberies and carjackings, auto thefts, and those types of offenses are closely linked with young offenders.
Alexa Ashwell, Fox 45 News.
The United States is launching additional airstrikes against Houthi rebels in Yemen, a day after those rebels struck a U.S.-owned ship in the Gulf of Aden. The Houthis say that they're acting in solidarity with the Palestinian people and have threatened to target more U.S. ships.
And this comes as Qatar says it has brokered a deal allowing medicine to be delivered to more than 100 Israeli hostages. The deal also allows for more aid shipments to civilians in Gaza. It is the first agreement between Israel and Hamas since a week-long ceasefire back in November. And here at home, a group of federal workers was planning a walkout today showing support for Gaza before the weather had other plans.
While that walkout was canceled, some lawmakers are voicing concern about the legality of the demonstration. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins has the story.
The planned protest didn't happen Tuesday because federal workers were told to stay home after a blizzard hit the nation's capital. This snow day impacting demonstrators' ability to publicly protest the Biden administration's handling of the Israel-Hamas war. Federal employees from nearly 24 agencies were reportedly planning to participate in this day of mourning, staying home from work to show solidarity for Gaza. The plan, organized by the group Feds United for Peace. According to their Instagram, staffers from the NSA, the State Department, DOD, the House of Representatives, the White House, and many other agencies were set to participate. Speaker Mike Johnson warning anyone who walked off the job deserves to be fired, promising to personally ensure disciplinary action will be taken. Strikes by federal employees are against the law. Critics argue this falls under the legal definition of a strike. The courts have long established strikes are not a constitutional right.
The federal law is very clear. If you're a federal employee, you can't strike. There's no one who works in the government for any length of time and doesn't have any number of policies that they intensely disagree with. Striking is not an option. Under federal law, it's a crime.
The group, in an apparent attempt to circumvent consequences, asserting